can hear me okay. Thank you very much for inviting me to come along and talk about our family's experience with adoption and with FASD. Our daughter Isabel is only 6, but it feels as though we have lived through a lifetime of challenges as parents already, and we're very aware that this is only the beginning, really, of our family's journey with FASD. Isabel came home when she was 8 months old. She was a beautiful baby, really smiley and sociable, ate well, slept well. Her foster carer described her as a perfect baby, and she really, really was. Around the age of 2, we started to notice some changes. She went from being a really easygoing baby, really kind of laid back, to having huge meltdowns over the smallest of things. She began to hit and bite and throw things and headbutt, sometimes for no apparent reason at all. We noticed unusual behaviour starting, like she would flap her arms when she was really excited. She would go through strange phases, like blinking really, really quickly for 5 minutes at a time and didn't seem like she could stop. One phase she went through, she started to retch whenever she saw the colour red, which made Christmas interesting. She had so much more energy than all of her friends, and she stopped sleeping for more than a few hours a night. And this all happened quite quickly. I have a background of working with children with learning disabilities, so I knew that something wasn't quite right. Some of Isabel's behaviours looked like autism, some looked a bit like ADHD, but she didn't really fit perfectly into any of those boxes. So we started to try and get some help very early on. We asked, first of all, we kind of asked teacher friends and things for tips like timeouts and behavioral sort of reward charts and all the kind of usual things. That didn't go very well. We basically gave up on timeout the day Isabel started ripping the wallpaper off the walls. We then started asking all the professionals that we could think of. So we started with health visitor, nursery, sort of key workers, our social worker, sort of going on to the GP. We were referred to the local paediatric service, where we saw a consultant who gave Isabel a very thorough physical examination. She listened to me talk, and then very politely said that there was nothing wrong with her, there was nothing she could do, and suggested that we kind of go back to speak to social work. And we went round in circles like that for quite a while. Lots of different suggestions were made, but the main things, were like, should grow out of it, it's phase, maybe it's attachment difficulties. People either thought it was a phase mainly, or the other kind of main point was that maybe I should go to some parenting classes and get a handle on my willful child. That was one of the main suggestions as well from the professionals. Because of course, most of her violent and aggressive behaviour was and still is kind of stored up during the day to unleash when she gets home and show us, how hard she's been working at fitting in with her peers and doing what she's told at school, so she doesn't get rejected. The last people I called when Isabel was 4 was Adoption UK. And it is no exaggeration to say that if they were the first people I had called rather than the last few years would have been very different for us. I called Adoption UK at my lowest point, and it was the first time that any professional had said to me, I believe you, I have been there, and there is support out there for you. They talked to me about FASD, and it was like a light bulb went off in my head. It explained everything. I went back to the GP again and asked for another referral to the paediatric service. And this time around, we saw a different consultant who knew about FASD. And literally within 20 minutes, she said she was pretty positive this is what Isabel had. And the relief of finally finding an answer that day was just overwhelming for me and my husband. But I wish I could say that the day Isabel did get her diagnosis. That was the end of our struggle. Of course, it wasn't. The nature of life and the nature of FASD, there are always going to be things that she struggles with and that we struggle with as a family. But the big difference now compared to then is that we have support. And it's the right kind of support from people who understand, who have the experience and the skills to help us remember that we're not alone, and there are ways through these challenges. And I cannot overstate the importance of having that kind of support. For so long, we had been shouting from the rooftops about what was going on in our home to anyone who would listen. And although most of the professionals were sympathetic, not one of them had enough knowledge or training about FASD to realise what was actually going on. And it makes me sad to think about the difference it would have made in those early days if our health visitor or somebody at the nursery had recommended an FASD assessment. I know there are many more families out there who've had difficult experiences like ours, and a service like the FASD Hub is invaluable to people like me who needed the right kind of help and support. Calling Adoption UK that day, it was the start of a huge shift in how we parent our daughter, how we advocate for her, and how we are now moving forward as a family. I'd like to finish by saying that if I could wave a magic wand and make changes to the system so that other people wouldn't go through the same things that we have, I would like all educators and professionals within the health and social care sector, anyone who works with children, to take part in FASD training so that this condition, which is 4 times more common than autism, could be recognised earlier and the right support for children and their families could be accessed. I would also say that there is still not enough joined up thinking and communication between professionals. My husband and I had to be the go-betweens who passed information between the doctors, the therapists, social workers and the educators so that everybody could be kept up to date. And if I'm being honest, because of the very fact that not all professionals know about FASD, it is far too easy for them to judge the parents and offer advice that is just not appropriate. It is exhausting parenting a child with FASD, not least because we are always talking about the challenges we face. And we hardly ever get the chance to say how amazing and smart and determined and funny and beautiful and athletic and creative our daughter is, because she is, you know, and that's far more important. She is the most awesome little person I have ever met. And I'm sure that, you know, most parents would say the same about their children. And that is why accessing the right support for them and their families is so important. Thank you.